Mummy, it's too dark and cold to play outside. Will you tell us a story?
Yes, dear.
Mummy, why does that girl come and stay every night in the corner? Don't be silly, darling, there's nobody there. Yes, there is. She said for you to tell us the story about the girl you pushed in the river. She said it's dreadfully cold and lonely in the water, and she wants to stay with us by the fire. Hello, welcome back to my channel, Goddess of Gore. My name is Vix and I like to talk about horror, thriller, fantasy and sci-fi books. As you have guessed from the title or from that introduction, I am here today on the darkest of days, in this particular part of the world at least, to tell you all about the spooky Victorian Gothic books, new and old. I think are the creme de la creme for telling on dark winter months, and all about the British tradition of scaring the family during the long dark winter months. I think we should start with a short history lesson about where the tradition of telling scary stories around winter started. So where did this tradition start? First of all, I have to admit I didn't know that this was just a British thing. I presumed that it was something that we all did in the Northern Hemisphere, but no. Turns out it's just us here in the British Isles who love to scare the pants off the whole family, young and old, since way before the Victorian times. But it gained popularity in the 1800s with the publications of the printed books of what we consider the Gothic classics, and this made it even easier to scare grannies and toddlers alike. The darkness lasting around 16 or 17 hours during the winter, we spend a lot of time in the dark. So what else is there to do but get close to the fire, light a candle and try to not see shapes in the shadows and monsters in the flames? The old ways traditions that Christmas merges into means the myths and folklore stories of winters past are sought after and has pretty much been a Christmas thing ever since. And you will find a lot of classic books having an introduction of something along the lines of they were taking turns telling stories on Christmas Eve, when Mavis asked Edward to tell the one about the haunted mansion. With TV dramas taking over from the printed books' popularity since the 1970s, with book adaptations being a bit of a BBC TV tradition ever since. I mean, in the UK this year, for example, there will be the M.R. James's Count Magnus adapted for the BBC by Mark Gatiss. And if you don't know who he is, well, he's a chap with a love of horror films and horror books. Happens to have a lot of money and famous friends, so we like him very much. But what do I think that you should be reading this winter? Well, obviously I think you should start with the classics like Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, and I'll be honest, the films or dramas are just as good, so watch one of those if you don't want to read. This, of course, opens on Christmas Eve with Mr. Scrooge refusing to go around his nephew's house, the only relative he has left, for dinner, since he sees Christmas as a complete waste of Fred's money and time. And then he grudgingly allows his clerk, Mr. Cratchit, the day off to celebrate with his family. He goes around throwing shade at carol singers and charity collectors alike. He is a rather unlikable character indeed. But when he is visited by his work partner, a Mr. Marley, who has been dead for many a year, and he's told to change his ways or else. Well, you can imagine how that goes down. The rest of the book is what happens when you don't heed the words from your dead friend's ghost. And I think in this there is even a line about Fred telling ghost stories around the fire. Next is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. Again, there's a few film adaptations if you prefer, and this is about Arthur Kipps, a solicitor, and the strange case of closing the estate of a woman named Alice Drablow, recently deceased. And this also starts on Christmas Eve with Kips's second wife and stepchildren telling ghost stories around the fire. See, I didn't make this up. This is a genuine wintertime tradition. Arthur, Kips, is encouraged by his wife to tell a ghost story too, but he gets a cob on, goes upstairs to sit in his room and get angry. He begins to write down the story of the time he spent at Eelmarsh House and the strange Alice Drablow and the very creepy and mysterious figure of the woman dressed head to toe in black. M.R. James wrote lots of ghost stories during his life, but Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You My Lad is one of the classic TV dramas that is always on at Christmas, starring the amazing late John Hurt. This is a short story found in the Ghost Stories of an Antiquary collection. This is about a haunted object that the poor Parkins finds in some old ruins when he travels to a town for a holiday. Honestly, this fella just wanted a quiet game of golf down south, and he gets the spook of his life when he finds this old whistle. The Little Stranger by one of my favourite British authors, Sarah Waters, is set 100 years or so later than the Victorian classics in the 1940s and is told from the perspective of a country physician and the family in a huge falling down, creepy house where the husband is suffering from the after effects of the Second World War. It is in this house where the supernatural may or may not be responsible for a series of ever worsening events, first with a placid Labrador dog attacking a child and then deaths one after another after another. A more recent release is The Whistling by Rebecca Netley, and this is one I haven't read yet, but I do have it on my January TBR. This is set in remote Scotland and we're back in the 1800s for this one, with our main character Elspeth taking up the position of a nanny to one little girl who has not spoken a word since her twin brother died suddenly and the former nanny had disappeared. She begins to inquire as to what actually happened to the twin and the nanny, but no one will speak of it. And things take a creepy turn when winter gets near and she begins to hear lullabies sung in the corridors of the home and creepy dolls appearing in empty rooms. So chilling, and I love this cover. Next is one of only 2 offerings from an American author, the novella by S.H. Cooper, Inheriting Her Ghosts, about a strangely for the time independent woman who inherits her great-aunt's seaside manor house. Eudora cannot believe her luck. She thinks that this is going to be a place of calm and respite for her and her 2 enormous dogs. But it isn't long before she realises she is not alone in the house called High Hearth, and what her great-aunt left behind is a legacy that Eudora wishes she hadn't inherited at all. And the second US author is Edith Wharton, and pretty much any of the stories in her Ghosts, Edith Wharton's Gothic tales, will do. But The Lady's Maid's Bell is the one I want to recommend to you, in a similar vein to The Turn of the Screw, which also could fit this list, with the opening of that book being told from the fireplace during Christmas Eve, if I remember right. But this is told from the maid Hartley's point of view as she gets a job working for Mrs. Brimpton, who is childless since her children died some time ago, and her foreboding husband, who she is quickly warned to keep out of his way. Right from the start, things seem off. When she is shown around the house, odd doors are left wide open and people appear in the corridors, seemingly unnoticed by the rest of the staff. Although at first Mrs. Brimpton seems reluctant to use the same bell she used to ring for her former maid Emma to attend to her, it's not before long that Hartley begins to hear it ringing in the middle of the night to summon her, but it seems that someone or something is answering the bell before she can. Wakenhyrst by Michelle Paver is one of 2 books that I immediately think of when I think of modern Gothic ghost stories, and this one takes place at the turn of the 20th century in 1906. This Edwardian ghost story being told from a 60-year-old Maud about her childhood in the family manor house, Wakesend, and starts with her talking about the murder her father committed with a pickaxe one day. He spent his years in an asylum painting pictures of demons and has now died. Superstition, folklore and religion serves up the spooks in this beautifully written, atmospheric ghost story. The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell is the other one I always think of when I think of ghost stories. This Gothic nightmare of misfortune is a story of sadness and grief, as I think all good ghost stories are. This is about a woman, Elsie, who not only was recently married but also recently widowed. She is sent to see out the rest of her pregnancy in her late husband's crumbling estate, The Bridge. As soon as she gets there, she is faced with hostility from everyone. The house staff, the servants, the villagers, all except her husband's cousin, Sarah. All alone except for her company, Elsie finds a locked room, and being a curious and bored woman, she finds out what's behind the door and the strange wooden figure that bears an uncanny resemblance to herself and a very old diary. She finds out that the staff of the house are positively petrified of this figure, and she's going to find out why. Dread and doom in every shadow of this book as the mysteries are unfolded from the past and present. Then, as a little bonus, is one that I am currently reading, The Haunting Season, an anthology of short stories. And as I said in my December TBR, this is a who's who in the UK Gothic story writing world. We've got Bridget Collins, Kieran Millward-Hargrave, Natasha Pulley, Andrew Michael Hurley, Imogen Hermes Goa, Jess Kidd, Elizabeth McNeil and Laura Purcell. They have all contributed stories, and I have read currently half of them so far. I can only imagine that the other half will be as good as the rest in this chilling collection of supernatural tales. This is chock full of the Gothic ghosties and hauntings from these huge names. So that is it. Those are my recommendations for you to read to yourself or your loved ones. You could read them to the children as you tuck them into bed over the holidays with just a candle to light your reading chair for the extra Gothic atmosphere and scare them silly. I mean, if we can't traumatise the next generation, what can we do? I hope these books will help to battle the cold and dark of winter with at least one of these spooky tales guaranteed to get your blood pumping, because winter is a time for cozying up on your chair with a good old ghost story. Although many of us no longer have fires or even fireplaces to send flickering shadows across our living rooms, I think we still have a huge appetite for the spooky. Just anything to fill that long reach of nights between midwinter, Christmas and then on into the bleak dead days of January. This is a time of year when ghosts should be taking on a particularly visceral character. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know if I've tempted you to pick up one of these books, or just let me know what you are reading right now. Like if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. Until next time, I want to wish you all a very happy holiday, whichever celebrations you're taking part in, alone or with friends or family. I wish you all a blessing, and remember that from this day on, the light will be coming. Make good book choices, my friends, and I will see you all soon. Bye bye.